This is a gigantic fraud loophole where the government can give money to an NGO and then that there are no controls over that NGO.
Elon Musk's net worth just plummeted $34 billion overnight.
By mid-2025, over $25 billion worth of investments tied to Elon Musk's empire. Tesla, SpaceX, xAI, and Neuralink had either left U.S. soil or stalled in planning limbo. Not because the tech wasn't ready, not because the capital wasn't there, but because the rules kept changing. Between shifting tariffs, tightening labor compliance, and rising federal uncertainty, the cost of building in America was no longer just financial, it was strategic. So Musk did what markets do, he recalculated. New Tesla battery capacity that was once destined for Texas broke ground in Mexico instead. A Neuralink biosystems lab quietly opened in Toronto. xAI's training clusters routed through compute hubs in Singapore, not California. No press release, no televised walkout, just a quiet rerouting of the future. In boardrooms and shareholder briefings, the message was simple. This isn't about leaving America, it's about where it's safe to stay. By early 2024, Elon Musk's companies began shifting toward a strategy insiders now refer to as the border flex model. The logic behind it is harsh but practical. If the rules shift, the factory moves. This marked a stark departure from the traditional Silicon Valley approach of doubling down on domestic presence. Instead of waiting for favorable U.S. policy shifts or incentives, Musk did what he's done for years, moved first and explained later. Tesla had been expected to announce a major battery expansion in Texas, following years of public commitments and local subsidies. But when construction began in Nuevo León, Mexico, it caught even some investors off guard. That wasn't the only surprise. In parallel, Neuralink, Musk's neurotech firm, launched a bioresearch wing in Toronto, sidestepping increasingly complex federal biomedical oversight in the U.S. And perhaps most symbolically, Musk's AI venture, xAI, quietly began hosting its large training clusters, the backbone of AI model development in Singapore and Alberta. In all three cases, the through line wasn't cheap labor. It was regulatory clarity, infrastructure, reliability, and political consistency. One senior executive, quoted anonymously in a 2025 investor call, summed up the rationale: you can't build decade-long technology on week-by-week political mood swings. We need continuity more than we need incentives. What's unfolding isn't a total departure from the U.S., but a strategic decoupling from dependence on it. Musk still maintains massive U.S. footprints in Austin, Fremont, and Cape Canaveral. But his capital bets are getting smaller on American soil and bolder elsewhere. That shift is now echoed across his company's planning documents, where risk assessments highlight not just supply chain volatility or competition, but U.S. policy unpredictability as a central threat to scalability.
To be honest, Elon Musk coming out and saying, there is a huge amount of fraud, I welcome that message completely, because finally someone is actually saying this.
The broader message is clear. For the first time in decades, the U.S. is not the default destination for American innovation, even from the people who once personified it. By mid-2025, the phrase "Made in America" had become less a point of pride for Elon Musk's companies and more a logistical warning sign. What was once a patriotic slogan now meant months of permitting delays, unpredictable zoning fights, and rapidly shifting environmental regulations. And while labor costs or tax incentives were often blamed publicly, insiders pointed to something else as the true deal-breaker: regulatory volatility. Tesla's planned expansion in Nevada, pitched as a linchpin for U.S.-based EV battery resilience, was abruptly put on pause in Q1 2025 after prolonged disputes over water use limits and compliance with new desert ecosystem thresholds. Local officials claimed it was procedural. Company executives privately called it unworkable. At SpaceX, the challenge wasn't on the ground, but in orbit. In early 2025, a fresh set of FAA rules aimed at tightening low Earth orbital traffic safety forced the company to delay several Starlink launches. The result: scrubbed launch windows and idle crews at Cape Canaveral. The issue wasn't technical failure, it was bureaucracy. Even simple zoning approvals for Neuralink and xAI in the Austin area were delayed over 7 months, with conflicting rulings between state and county-level offices. These weren't major facility builds. They were data center expansions and R&D upgrades, the kind of infrastructure that in Singapore or Alberta could break ground in under 60 days. And that's exactly what started happening. Canada, seeing opportunity, introduced AI facility fast lanes in Ontario, and Alberta guaranteeing permitting within 90 days for projects involving data infrastructure, neurosimulation, or biotech. Mexico rolled out guaranteed renewable energy contracts for EV-related factories, insulating investors from future grid volatility. And Singapore, already a global data hub, finalized a zero-tariff zone for compute infrastructure, removing red tape for AI chip import and export. The math became simple. Why gamble on unpredictable permitting in Nevada when you can build in Nuevo León or Toronto with clear timelines and guaranteed utilities? Musk didn't cancel his American operations, but he began hedging against them. And that shift from full-throttle commitment to risk-calibrated hesitation is reshaping what Made in America means in 2025, not just for Tesla or SpaceX, but for every tech and infrastructure giant watching from the sidelines. By 2025, the tension between Elon Musk and Washington had become one of the quietest yet most consequential fractures in American industrial policy. There was no formal declaration of war, no fiery testimony before Congress, no televised standoff. But beneath the surface, in tax code footnotes, missed calls, and rerouted investments, a rift had formed, and it was growing deeper. It started with the federal EV tax credit. Revised in early 2024 to favor union-assembled electric vehicles, the new rules were pitched as a boost for domestic labor. But for Tesla, a non-union automaker, the message was clear. Innovation alone wasn't enough. Buyers of Teslas, regardless of their environmental performance or U.S. manufacturing content, found themselves disqualified from full incentives, while competing EVs with lower range or foreign parts received federal support as long as they were assembled by union labor. Musk, never one to stay quiet, called it economic favoritism dressed up as climate policy in a January 2025 post on X. The tension didn't stop at cars. In biotech, Neuralink faced extended delays in FDA trial approvals, prompting Musk to question again publicly whether U.S. health regulators were capable of moving at the speed of science. Around the same time, xAI's licensing applications for advanced AI models were reportedly stuck in review, with leaked memos showing agency officials citing national algorithmic ethics as a new evaluation criteria language that, according to internal sources, was added just weeks before Musk's submission. And then came SpaceX. The FAA's increased scrutiny over orbital congestion, while valid in a growing satellite economy, led to multiple launch windows being scrubbed or delayed, with Musk cryptically posting, "Some people in D.C. want rockets to stay grounded. We don't." Through it all, Musk continued to speak in favor of American innovation. But his actions began telling a different story. Investment shifted overseas. Regulatory filings thinned out in the U.S. Internal projects were routed through Toronto, Monterey, and even Singapore. What used to be described as an American empire of engineering was now becoming a decentralized web of geopolitically hedged ventures. This wasn't rebellion. It wasn't political grandstanding. It was something more calculated and in some ways more permanent. A quiet realignment. A bet that long-term resilience may no longer come from Washington's promises, but from diversifying away from them. While U.S. headlines trumpeted American manufacturing revivals and reshoring wins, the capital was quietly going elsewhere. Elon Musk, long considered the face of U.S. tech ambition, wasn't pulling out of America, but he was hedging heavily, and the signal was unmistakable: build where policy stays out of the way. The numbers told the story. For every $1 Musk invested inside U.S. borders, $2.70 went abroad. Not to China or off-the-grid havens, but to North American and Asia-Pacific allies, where regulations were predictable, infrastructure was ready, and incentives came with fewer strings. Tesla, for instance, launched its next-generation powertrain production unit in Ontario, choosing Canadian energy stability and labor incentives over another round of U.S. permitting battles. SpaceX, meanwhile, expanded its satellite module assembly operations in Querétaro, Mexico, a region now increasingly referred to as New Space Valley, thanks to aerospace clusters forming south of the border. In press statements, company reps cited logistics agility and treaty-backed export pathways as key drivers. But behind the scenes, insiders pointed to something simpler: fewer delays, fewer hearings, fewer surprises. And then there was xAI, Musk's push into next-gen artificial intelligence. In a move that caught many off guard, xAI began leasing GPU clusters in Singapore, not California. The reason, according to a leaked infrastructure memo, the choice was driven by predictable sovereign compute frameworks, a polite way of saying no last-minute regulatory hurdles. Singapore offered tax clarity, data sovereignty, stability, and fast-lane infrastructure approvals. The U.S. SAWS, by contrast, had just proposed new AI licensing standards requiring quarterly review for models exceeding 1 trillion parameters. In boardrooms and supply chains, this wasn't seen as betrayal. It was seen as adaptation, a re-anchoring of the factory to where the signal was clearest, not patriotism, but predictability. Not just incentives, but institutional follow-through. This isn't an exit, it's a recalibration. Elon Musk hasn't turned his back on the US, but in 2025, he's operating on a different equation. Invent here, build where it's stable. The shift isn't ideological, it's economic. Regulatory gridlock, shifting tax rules, and politicized incentives have made America less predictable for long-term industrial bets. And Musk, like any high-stakes operator, is reading the signals. He's not alone. Intel is expanding chip packaging in Poland. Pfizer is scaling precision manufacturing in Singapore. Across sectors, the new model is emerging. R&D stays in the US, but factories follow certainty. It's not a collapse. It's a correction from sentiment to strategy. If Elon Musk, the clearest symbol of 21st century American innovation, now chooses to launch batteries in Mexico, assemble satellites in Canada, and train AI models in Singapore, is the US still leading? Or just licensing its ideas abroad? This isn't about one man, it's about the signal he sends. When even Musk, whose rise was funded, boosted, and built inside the US system, starts hedging his bets globally. It's not rebellion, it's a reality check. America remains a hub for invention, but invention isn't the finish line. Production is, and when production leaves quietly, it rarely returns loudly. Don't just read press releases, follow the permits, the filings, the groundbreakings. Innovation doesn't die with words, it just crosses a border. Watch where Musk goes next. Then ask, why didn't we keep him here?